You were in Brussels a few days ago, or was it 2 days ago? You want to give us a highlight on some of the things that were discussed? What was the dividend generally for Africa from that summit?
Let me first say that the meeting was Africa-Europe Summit that takes place every 5 years. It had been planned well over a year ago. So that was the key event for this trip. We used the occasion to respond to the request of the African Development Bank to be able to have a session, a side meeting on the report of the high-level panel on fragile states. As you may recall, I chaired that session. And we also responded to an invitation for the group called Roll Back Malaria, given that the Global Fund has been supportive of Liberia in our malaria program. And so we joined other heads of states in a breakfast meeting to appeal and encourage the international community to continue to support the malaria program. The main summit event had as a theme peace, security, and prosperity. And it was chaired by the president of the African Commission, the head of the European Commission, the head of our authority, African Authority, European Union Authority, and all the heads of states, the majority of the African heads of states were there, joined by the European leaders to discuss these subjects in open dialogue. It provided an opportunity for side meetings. I met at his request, with the Minister for Africa of the UK Commonwealth Office. And Simmons, that's correct. And we talked about the bilateral programs, also talked about encouraging private investment in Africa, and he mentioned the Hummingbird project, which is still under negotiations with us about bringing it to a conclusion so we can create jobs. We talked about the UNMIL drawdown and the support that's needed for the security sector, particularly the training of police. I also had the opportunity to meet with the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel, where we talk about Germany's support for Liberia, particularly in the power sector. And she and I talked about perhaps a visit sometime later to be able to discuss the deepening of our bilateral relations. So,
on the summit, Barroso said it was a relationship between equals. You really think that's true? And what is Africa really taking or bringing to this partnership?
Africa is working with Europe to strengthen and deepen those historical and traditional ties. You know, Africa has been diversifying its partnership over the years. And so we've been reaching out to Asia, to China, to the East, to do that. And I think Europe feels that they've been slipping, you know, because they have not continued the engagement and the intensity. They have not promoted private sector investment as they should. And today, Africa is on a rise. African growth, African natural resources are now very much part of topical issues. And Europe doesn't want to be left behind. At the same time, the quality of the trade relationship between Africa and Europe is something that we want to maintain and we want to strengthen. And so this was the occasion to do this formally at these sessions and informally in bilateral meetings.
Talking about trade, because the Ghanaian president said it's easy to export raw material into the European market, but the finished product, to send it to Europe, we face some constraint from Africa. Value-added, the trade barriers, how do we break them between the two continents?
Well, as you know, the Economic Partnership Agreement is being pushed by Europe. We've been negotiating it for well over 2 years. And that's supposed to be the opening of markets on both sides. The reason why we've not concluded is our own fears that by opening the markets, they would be at an advantage because they'll be able to get all of their commodities into our markets, and we will not at the level of industrialization to penetrate their markets. But they have done some opening of their markets selectively. And so what we need to do, well, the record is clear anyway, that where you open trade, where you open markets, initially it might prove to be disadvantageous for the less developed countries. But in the end, that free movement opened up opportunities for private capital, for private investment, and for industrialization. And what we're focusing on too is what's the quid pro quo? What do we get from Europe? And what one wants is to see that there's sufficient money to enable us to build our industries through improvement in infrastructure. And I think they've committed to some $6 billion for a 5-year period to be able to meet those transformative needs. And so I believe we'll see that within several months from now, we hope those agreements will be concluded.
Yeah, we'll see. You're one of the few African presidents that made intervention during the summit, and you talk about small arms. Small arms have been a problem on the continent, and you call for the robust implementation of the terms of the Small Arms Treaty. Has there been any problem with that treaty in your mind?
No, the arms treaty that was signed has not really been implemented. I mean, this is where the larger countries that produce arms have committed themselves to reduce the proliferation of arms. Well, they haven't done so. You may recall one of our colleagues even mentioned the whole thing in a joking manner in which he said, we don't produce those guns, they bring those guns and they... So, but I think the whole appeal was, we now have the treaty, and Liberia fought hard to get that treaty, signed in very small but meaningful ways. And so now implementation, that means you have to get the compliance by the United States and by European nations that are arm producers.
Okay, we are in Europe. A few hours ago, you met the Pope. You want to give me an impression about meeting him?
Oh, I think this, for all of us who were there, yourself included, this was such, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I found the Pope very affable. We just talked freely. I told him about our efforts for peace and security and reconciliation. And he encouraged me to continue to work on those things. I asked him to pray for Liberians can have a sense of holiness, can have a sense of reconciliation, a sense of peace, that we can love one another, and asked him to give me the courage of tolerance as we tried to do that. And the Holy Father was, he's so humble. At the end, when I said, Holy Father, please pray for Liberia and for Liberians. And he said, Madam President, please pray for me too.
So, did you pray for him?
Oh yes, I who am I to pray for the Pope? But in the night I would say, God bless the Pope, that he continues to set the example for paths that we all hope we can tread.
Okay, so on the political front, you met the President of Italy, you met the President of the Senate. What was the objective of these meetings?
With the President of Italy is mainly to recall the historical relationships between our two countries, that in the period of our conflict, we lost this favored relationship. Many of Italian private companies did a lot of construction work in Liberia. And we, again, was to encourage them to re-engage. And the Speaker of the House of Parliament, a very young woman who told us about her story of coming into that position without necessary experience, but bringing to it a breath of fresh air, new dynamism that we applauded. Again, was to say that we know that today Liberia is not one of Italy's favored nations, but we feel this is a way to start the whole process toward gaining that favoritism. So
what did they say? Did they agree to help you anyway establish the relationship or strengthening it?
Let's put it, first of all, they reminded us that today Italy itself is going through some very difficult times. And so they need to also respond to the same problems we have, like youth unemployment. It would take them time to get their growth up to where it ought to be. But there's something they want to think about. They particularly thought that they could be useful in encouraging private companies, to take a look at Liberia. And I think it was pointed out later on that there is an Italian construction company that's now constructing the central bank building. Mm-hmm. That maybe that could be used as an entry point for other Italian companies to follow suit.
Okay, before we go, I have to put this to you. There is this perception that when you leave the country, the dividend is not felt. Many persons are not happy. In fact, just a few hours ago, I was reading on Facebook and talking to people back home about this Ebola thing. That you left the country and they saw that as being insensitive, you should have been around. You want to wrap up on that?
It's unfortunate that people cannot examine things in their true context. First of all, when I left, Ebola had just started. Mm-hmm. I had meetings, with the Minister of Health and others, with the person who I left, Chairman of the Cabinet, Honorable Morris Dukley. We talked about where it was. Of course, these was just isolated cases on the border. At that time, I wanted to make a statement. I was advised by the minister, no. If the president makes a statement, you escalate it, and people begin to think it's of greater concern than it is. And so we all agreed that my business here of trying to promote development for the country was important, that nothing I would do there that I couldn't do here. That is to say, being properly briefed, being able to give advice and counsel and direction to them. And that's what has happened. I could not have done any more. I would have probably been in Monrovia, yes, but here with the communication, I'm just as effective talking to the chairman of the cabinet, talking to people, getting updates from them. And so, obviously I am concerned, and that's why I am, but I'm also pleased that the whole thing has been well managed by our health team. It's been well contained. And so my short period of stay will not make that difference. I'll be back home on Tuesday, and I'll join the effort. I'll continue where I'm doing from here. People need to understand that when I go abroad, when they talk about another dividends, when you see roads being built, when you see water systems coming in, when you see us being able to address our health needs, when you see development, a lot of this comes from my effort. I don't go about and I don't bring back signed checks. It doesn't work that way. But I pave the way. I do the negotiations. I said to people, when people say that we use money for lobbyists, they don't understand. I say, I am Liberia's best lobbyist. What I do for Liberia, no lobby company can do. And so when I go out, I'm able to break through grounds. World Bank support comes because of my long years of association with them. The same for the United Nations, the African Development Bank. That's why today they always call upon me because of my resource mobilization strength. They all call upon me to head the different groups that they have, and I do that to try to mobilize resources not only for Liberia but for Africa. And I get the commendation, the support, and the thanks of Africans all over for what I do for Africa.
But the commendation back home is not too strong. The criticism is higher than the commendation, you think so?
Oh, the criticism is there, but that's because we have a difficult society. Sometimes you have to wonder. People say, okay, somebody's not appreciating their own home, but I think it's a bit more than that. You have a few people who have some resources, people who still are looking for political relevance. And so they always are, stirring up here, there, yonder. But I travel around the country, and I tell you, Monrovia may be this hotbed of tensions and confusion, but overall,
what are you going to do there?
Again, it's one of those occasions where I'm the ambassador for water and sanitation for worldwide and whatnot. There's a large meeting of bringing corporate leaders and ministers together to talk about improving the access to water and sanitation, talk about Liberia's experience. And so that's just a one-day trip. in which I'll just go in. But as usual, when I go for one purpose, other things come up because I've already received requests to meet with the deputy of the French Cooperation Development Agency who wants to talk about bilateral programs. I've been asked to meet with the chief executive officer for Bolloré. You know, Bolloré is this large French company that's involved in port management. And so I'm sure they'll be talking to me about their interest in Buchanan and other ports in the country. You see, these are the kinds of dues that people do not know the value of. Tomorrow, if Bolloré signs a concession agreement, nobody will know that it started from one little meeting in Paris in which I impressed them and encouraged them to do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
You wanted to leave that question on?